door slammed so hard the picture frames rattled on the wall. I stood in the kitchen, hands still on the dish towel, and I didn't move. 63 years old, standing in my own house, and I didn't move. That's the part that still gets me, even now. Not what she did. Not the sound of it. It's that I just stood there. My name is not important. What I'm about to tell you is, I built that house with my own hands, not a metaphor. I mean, I actually built it. My father-in-law taught me how to pour a foundation the summer before my wife and I got married. We broke ground in late August, 1987. My wife used to joke that I poured so much of myself into that house that the walls knew my heartbeat. She said things like that. She had a gift for it. She passed 6 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. 4 months from diagnosis to the end, the house got very quiet after that. My son moved back in about a year later. He said it was to help me. I believed him. He was 34. Between jobs, coming out of a difficult stretch. I didn't ask too many questions. That's always been my way. Give people room. Trust they'll find their footing. My wife used to say I was too patient for my own good. She was right about that too. He brought her with him. His girlfriend at the time. They'd been together maybe 8 months. Her name was Claudette. She was polished. I'll give her that. Very put together. The kind of woman who notices every detail in a room and files it away somewhere. First time she walked through my front door, she looked around the living room the way a buyer looks at a property. Not rude about it. Just assessing. I told myself I was imagining things. My son, Everett. He's always been a gentle person. Too gentle, maybe. He got that from his mother's side. Quiet, accommodating, conflict-averse to a fault. Growing up, he'd rather walk away from a fight than stand his ground even when he was right. I used to try to teach him that there's a difference between choosing peace and choosing to disappear. He'd nod and go back to whatever book he was reading. They got married 14 months after moving in. Small ceremony. I paid for most of it. After the wedding, something shifted, small things at first. The way Claudette started referring to the house as our place. The way certain routines changed without any discussion. She rearranged the kitchen and didn't mention it. She threw out a set of mugs my wife had collected on our road trips across the Southwest, said they were cluttering the shelf. I found one of them in the trash. A blue one with a Roadrunner painted on the side. We'd bought it at a rest stop in New Mexico 2009. My wife thought it was the ugliest thing she'd ever seen and bought it immediately. Said ugly things need love too. I took that mug out of the trash, washed it, and put it in the back of the cabinet where Claudette wouldn't see it. I didn't say anything. That was my first mistake. The first real sign came about 8 months into the marriage. I'm a retired contractor. 31 years in commercial construction, project management, site supervision, estimating. I'm not rich, but I'm not struggling. I own the house outright. I have a pension. I have savings. I built a modest life and I took care of it. Claudette started asking questions about my finances. Casual at first. How much did a house like this appraise for these days? Did I have a financial advisor? Had I ever thought about downsizing? Her brother-in-law was in real estate. Very trustworthy. He could give me an assessment if I ever wanted one. I said I'd keep it in mind. Then she started talking about investment opportunities. Her cousin was involved in something in private equity. Early stage, very limited access, but family could get in if they moved fast. She showed me some materials on a tablet, numbers that looked impressive, projections that looked even more impressive. I told her I preferred to keep my money where I could see it. She laughed like I'd made a joke. A few weeks after that, Everett came to me alone. He sat down at the kitchen table. The same table where he'd eaten every meal of his childhood. And he told me he was worried about my retirement, that inflation was eroding purchasing power, that the house was an underperforming asset. He used words I'd never heard him use before. He sounded like he was reading from a script he hadn't quite memorized. I looked at my son and I thought, when did you learn to talk like that? I said, Everett, Did Claudette ask you to have this conversation with me? He got very quiet. Then he said, she just wants what's best for the family. I said, That was the second time I didn't say enough. The situation with my grandson started about a year into the marriage. Everett and Claudette had a little boy. My daughter-in-law was already pregnant when they moved in, though they hadn't mentioned it at the time. His name is Oliver. He turned 2 that spring. Tow-headed kid with serious eyes, like he was always thinking something over. Reminded me so much of Everett at that age it made my throat tight. I loved that boy from the moment I saw him. Claudette controlled access to him, not in any way you could call out directly. There was always a reason. Oliver was napping. Oliver was napping. Though they were going to her mother's for the weekend. The schedule was unpredictable lately. She'd circle around and land on something that sounded reasonable, and I'd find myself on the outside of an afternoon I'd been looking forward to all week. The days I did spend with him were good. We'd sit on the back porch, and I'd let him stack things and knock them down. He called me Pop. I don't know who taught him that, but I wasn't going to argue with it. One afternoon, I overheard Claudette on the phone. I wasn't eavesdropping. I was coming down the hallway. She was in the bedroom, door half open. She was saying, as long as he thinks he has a relationship with the kid, he'll be reasonable. Once we have the deed transferred, he won't have any leverage left. I stood in the hallway for a moment. Then I went back to the kitchen and sat down and put both hands flat on the table. My wife used to say, when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. She borrowed that from someone else, but she meant it as her own. I believed it now. The slap happened on a Tuesday in November. I'd asked, politely, I thought, whether I could take Oliver to the park that afternoon. Just the 2 of us. An hour. A walk along the creek path we'd been doing since he was big enough to toddle. Claudette said she needed to check the schedule. An hour passed. I asked again. She told me this wasn't a good time, that Oliver had been fussy, that she had things to manage. I said, he's my grandson. I live in this house. I'm asking for 1 hour. She turned around from the counter very quickly, and she slapped me across the face, open hand, hard enough that I took a step back. Everett was standing not 6 feet away. He was looking at his phone. He didn't look up. Claudette said, in a voice that was almost bored, "Don't raise your tone with me in my house. My house." She said my house. I did not raise my voice. I did not say anything. I went upstairs, closed the bedroom door, and sat on the edge of my bed. My wife's side of the bed still has her pillow on it. I put my hand on it, and I stayed like that for a long time. When I came back downstairs 2 hours later, nobody mentioned it. I understood then, clearly and completely, what was happening. I understood that I had been slow-walked into a position where I had no obvious move. They were already living in my house. They had Oliver. Everett was not going to choose me. Claudette had calculated all of this probably from the beginning. The investments she'd pushed, the questions about the deed, the way she'd managed my access to Oliver. It was a picture that had been in a frame the whole time. I just never stepped back far enough to see it. I also understood that if I reacted the way part of me wanted to, loud, immediate, out the door, I would lose my grandson, and that she knew that. So, I didn't react. I went and made a pot of coffee. I asked if anyone wanted dinner. Claudette looked at me like she was reassessing something, like a chess player recalculating after an unexpected move. "Sure," she said. "That would be nice." I made pasta. I set the table. I was pleasant and quiet throughout the meal. Oliver sat in his high chair and ate 3 bites of everything and threw a piece of bread at the dog and laughed his head off. I laughed too. And while I was washing the dishes that night, I made a decision. I was going to be very, very patient. And I was going to be very, very patient. And I was going to be very, very smart. The first person I called was my attorney. Her name is Marvella. She's been my attorney for over 2 decades. She handled my wife's estate, the business dissolution when I retired, a property dispute with a neighbor 7 years back. I trust her about as much as I trust anyone. I called her from my truck, parked 2 blocks away from my own house. I told her everything. The conversation I'd overheard. The financial pressure. The slap. Everett's silence. The access to Oliver. There was a pause on the line. Then she said, "Okay, first thing we're going to do is document everything." I said I'd already started. I had. The morning after the slap, I had gone to a hardware store and purchased a small legal audio recorder. In my state, one-party consent, I wore it in my shirt pocket for the next 6 weeks. I'm not proud of it, but I'm also not sorry. I also had my pension statements, savings accounts, and deed all reviewed by Marvella. She made 2 copies of everything. She also walked me through what a quiet title action looks like and what options I had if I needed to move quickly. The second person I called was my oldest friend. His name is Wentworth. Went, we've always called him, and we've known each other since we were 17 years old. He's retired from the post office, lives 20 minutes away, and he is perhaps the most discreet person I have ever met. He's the kind of man who knew everything about everybody and never told a soul unless he absolutely had to. I told Went what was happening. He came over that Saturday while Everett and Claudette were out. We sat on the back porch. Oliver was with them. Went said, "You know what you have to do." I said, "I know." "You're going to let her think she's winning." "Yes." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "She slapped you, Henry." "That's my name. Henry." He said it like he was making sure I understood the weight of it, like he wanted to see if I was still holding on to the anger, or if I'd put it somewhere useful. "I know," I said. "Okay then." We sat there a while longer. The dog put his head on my knee. The leaves were coming down off the oak tree at the back of the yard, the one I planted the year Everett was born. "She called it her house," I said. Wen didn't say anything. "Right in front of him," Wen said. "He'll understand someday. When he's older and looking back, he'll know what he did." I said, "I hope you're right." Over the next few weeks, I let Claudette believe she was making progress. I attended a meeting with her brother-in-law, the real estate agent. I asked what seemed like interested questions. I let her think the wall was coming down. Meanwhile, I was doing something else entirely. I had been in commercial construction for 31 years. I knew people, property developers, attorneys, a few city councilmen. One of my oldest professional relationships was with a man named Aurelio, late 60s, semi-retired, about as sharp as anybody I'd ever met in business. We had worked together on 3 major projects over the years. He owed me a favor that I had never asked for. I called in the favor. I also hired a private investigator. This was Marvella's recommendation, not to dig up dirt for drama. She was careful about that, but to verify something specific. The investment opportunity Claudette had been pushing had a name, a company structure, and a registered agent. We wanted to know if it was real. Within 3 weeks, we had our answer. The structure was thin. The registered agent was a name connected to 2 other entities that had been quietly dissolved after complaints. It wasn't criminal in any provable way, not yet, but it was enough. I have to tell you something about that period. The weeks of patience, of smiling over dinner, of pretending nothing had happened. Those weeks were the hardest of my life, including the months after my wife died. Grief is heavy, but it's honest. What I was doing felt like wearing a mask every single day. I would lie awake at night in the room I had shared with my wife for 31 years, and I would stare at the ceiling, and I would have to remind myself, very deliberately, why I was waiting. Oliver. That was the reason. Every night I came back to the same word. He was 2 years old. He called me Pop. He didn't know anything about any of this, and it was my job to make sure that when all of this was over, he still had a grandfather. The dinner happened on the second Saturday in January. I had proposed it 2 weeks earlier, casually. I told Claudette and Everett I wanted to have a few people over for a meal. Old friends, nothing formal. I said it would be nice to have some life in the house. Claudette seemed pleased by this. I think she interpreted it as a sign that I was coming around. Relaxing. Letting go of the tension. She helped me plan the menu. I made roast chicken with herbs from the garden, potatoes, a salad, and a pie I'd been working on the recipe for since my wife first taught it to me in 1989. I set the table with the good plates. I put candles out. I made the house look exactly like the home it was. The guests arrived at 6. Marvella came. Went came. Aurelio came with his wife Constance. And then there was a fourth guest, a woman named Shepard, who was a reporter for the Regional Business Journal. She had been working for several months on a story about a pattern of elder financial exploitation in our area, specifically involving residential real estate and the transfer of assets from older homeowners to family members under pressure. Marvella had introduced us. Shepard had been very interested in what I had to share. Claudette came downstairs at 6:15, dressed nicely, carrying Oliver on her hip. She saw the table. She saw the candles. She smiled. Then she saw the guests. She knew when, of course. She'd met Erleel once before, at a barbecue, but she didn't know Marvella by sight. And she didn't know Shepard at all. I pulled out a chair for Oliver and got him settled with some crackers. He immediately threw one at the centerpiece, which got a laugh from everyone at the table. Everett came in from the garage, stopped when he saw the group, and looked at me. I said, "Come sit down, son." He sat. I sat at the head of the table. My house. My table. The chair where I have sat for 30 years. I looked at my daughter-in-law and I said, "I'm glad you could join us." I won't walk through every detail of what happened next. I'll say this. Marvella had documents. Aurelio had knowledge of what legitimate and illegitimate real estate pressure campaigns look like, and was prepared to say so clearly. Shepard was not there to ambush anyone. She was there because I had asked her to see the full picture, and she was thoughtful about it, and the recordings I had made, which Marvella had reviewed carefully for legality, captured 2 conversations that were, to put it plainly, unambiguous. Claudette did not yell. She's not that kind of person. She went very still, the way water goes still, right before something heavy drops into it. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she looked at Everett. Everett was looking at the table. She said quietly, "You did all this." I said, "I built this house. I raised a son in it. I buried my wife from it. I'm not signing it over to anyone." Oliver, oblivious and cheerful, held out a cracker in my direction. I took it. I ate it. I thanked him very seriously, and he laughed. The dinner was not comfortable after that, but it was honest, and in my experience, honest is worth more than comfortable by a country mile. The legal process that followed was not simple, and I won't pretend it was. There are things I can't go into while certain matters are still pending. What I can tell you is that Marvella earned every cent of her fee, that Aurelio's connections opened doors that I didn't even know needed opening. That Shepard story ran 6 weeks later and named no names but described a pattern that several people in my county recognized in their own situations. I can also tell you that my daughter-in-law moved out of my house in February. Everett did not move out with her. Not right away. That surprised me. It took me a while to understand it. I think, and I want to be careful here, because I'm still his father and I still love him. I think he had known. Somewhere he didn't let himself look directly what was happening. I think he had made himself not see it because seeing it would have required him to do something about it, and Everett has always found it very hard to do something about things that scare him. That's not an excuse, but it's the truth, as I understand it. He sat at the kitchen table after everything, and he told me he was sorry. I looked at my son for a long time. I thought about the boy who used to bring me his library books so I could read to him before bed. I thought about the afternoon he fell off his bike and cut his chin open, and I held a dish towel against the wound and told him he was brave even while he was crying. I thought about all the ways I had tried to hand him something durable and lasting and all the ways he had struggled to hold on to it. I said, "I know you are." I should have said something. He couldn't finish it. "Yeah," I said. "You should have." We sat there for a while. "Is Oliver staying here?" I asked. He nodded. "For now, we're working it out with the attorneys." I said, "Good." He looked up at me. Are we okay, Dad?" I thought about it. I really thought about it, which I think he deserved. "We're not okay yet," I said, "but I think we can get there, if you want to." He nodded again. He was crying a little, trying not to show it. Still that same boy in so many ways. "Okay," he said. "Okay," I said. Oliver had his 3rd birthday in March. We had cake on the back porch. Just the 3 of us. Everett, Oliver, and me. The dog sat next to Oliver's chair and waited with tremendous dignity for something to fall. Something always falls when Oliver is eating cake. The dog was not disappointed. I have a photograph from that afternoon. Oliver has frosting on his nose and he's pointing at the dog and laughing so hard he's almost falling off his chair. Everett is reaching out to catch him, and I'm sitting to the side watching them. And I looked at this photograph for a long time before I could name what I looked like. I looked like a man who kept something. That oak tree in the yard is still there. The one I planted when Everett was born. It's nearly 40 years old now. It's the biggest tree on the block. I look at it sometimes when I'm having coffee in the morning. I think about what my wife would say about all of this. She'd probably say something that was both kinder and sharper than anything I could come up with. She had a talent for that. I think she'd say, "You waited long enough." I think she'd be right. If you're going through something like this, if you have people in your life who are counting on you staying soft so they can keep taking, I want you to hear this from someone who's been there. Patience is not weakness. Quiet is not surrender. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is let someone believe they've already won, and then set the table. If this story meant something to you, please leave a comment below. Tell me where you're watching from, and if you know someone going through something like this, share it with them. You never know who needs to hear it. I'll see you next time. I've thought a lot about what made all of this possible. And the honest answer isn't what most people expect me to say. It wasn't the attorney. It wasn't the recorder in my shirt pocket. It wasn't even Aurelio or Went or Shepard. Those things mattered, but they weren't the root of it. What made it possible was a choice I made standing at a kitchen sink the night my daughter-in-law put her hand across my face in my own house. I could have walked out the front door in anger and felt righteous about it. I almost did. That version of events was right there, available, waiting for me to choose it. And it would have cost me everything. My grandson, my son, the chance to see any of this through with my head still level. Instead, I made pasta. I set the table. I was quiet. I'm not saying that was easy. I want to be honest about that because I think people hear I stayed calm and imagine some kind of serenity, like the person telling the story was above it all. I wasn't above anything. I was furious in a way I hadn't been since I was a young man, the kind of furious that sits in your chest and makes your hands feel strange. I just decided that fury was mine to manage, not hers to use. That's what intelligence is in the end, as I understand it. Not book knowledge or sharp words. It's the ability to see further down the road than your immediate reaction wants you to see. Claudette was counting on me to react. She had built her whole plan around a version of me who would either capitulate or explode. When I did neither, she had to recalculate. And people who've spent their lives counting on other people's predictable reactions are not very good at recalculating. The morality of it matters too. I want to say that plainly. I didn't set that dinner table to humiliate her. I set it to tell the truth. There's a difference. Everything I did in those 2 months, the recordings, the attorney, the PI, was in service of the truth being known, not in service of revenge for its own sake. I think that distinction kept me from becoming something I didn't want to be. When you lose your ethics in the process of defending yourself, you haven't really defended anything that counts. And Oliver. I keep coming back to Oliver. He's 3 years old and he doesn't know what happened. Someday, maybe I'll tell him, in whatever version of the story is appropriate for a young person to hear. What I want him to understand, what I want him to carry forward into his own life, is that endurance is not the same as weakness. That the people who are worth trusting are the ones who stay steady when it costs them something. I stayed. Not because I was powerless, because I was playing a longer game. Everett and I are still finding our footing. It's slow. Some days are easier than others, but he's here, and Oliver is here, and the oak tree in the yard is still standing, and so am I. That's enough. For now, that's enough. For now.